really stick on too. That's nice. Yeah.
Oh, is that from the conference?
Yeah. Oh.
I was gonna go through the bin, a whole bunch of stuff came on.
No, this is, I'm gonna go to Edwards here. I went to the, I think the legislative update.
Oh, okay. No, I don't know.
So trying to not panic, but. I think we have four, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, look at that, it's right on time, 2:01. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Can you do the roll call, please?
Okay. Okay, this is the May 15th special JLMBC meeting. Before we get started, just a general reminder, when speaking, if you could please speak into the mic, it would be greatly appreciated. Okay. We're going to start with public comments.
Call to order.
Sorry, apologies. We're going to start with roll call. So starting with the employee organizations. Shauna Janeway in for Janita Iguelor.
Here.
Marlene Fonseca.
Here.
Chad Boggio.
Here.
Esteban Lizardo.
Here.
Lisa Palomi.
Here.
Malika Billups.
Present.
Tony Royster.
Here.
Yes. Matthew Rudnick.
Present.
Paul Girard in for Matthew Zybel.
Present.
Hetty Sanchez.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. We got a full house. Let's move right into public comments. Do we have any comments?
For those attendees on the phone, please press 9 on your phone to be placed in line for the speaker queue. For attendees in the room, please bring your speaker card to the front desk. Okay, it looks like we have no public speakers for today.
Thank you. So we can move on to action item 3, committee report 2521.
Good afternoon. My name is Mindy Lam. I'm a recent senior benefits analyst with Employee Benefits Division. I will be presenting the standard quarterly report regarding staffing reimbursements. In this one, we are recommending that the committee approve reimbursing the personnel department from the Employee Benefits Trust Fund for staff support in the quarter ending March 31st. For the LA Well program, a total amount of $210,525.08 are to be reimbursed for 5 analyst positions. This includes the senior benefits analyst position that was filled in January this year. For the Live Well program, a total of $80,770.94 to be reimbursed from the wellness sub account for the 2 positions. So these amounts are inclusive of direct and indirect costs as calculated based on direct staff salaries and controller special rates for indirect cost centers. Details are included in attachment A. That concludes this report. Please let me know if there are any questions on this item before looking at the recommendation.
Are there any questions? If not, then we can take a motion.
We'll move to approve. Second.
Thank you. Motion and second. Let's go ahead and do roll call. Okay.
Okay, we are going to start the roll call for vote, starting with the employee organization. Shauna, your vote.
Aye.
Marlene, your vote.
Aye.
Chad, your vote.
Aye.
Esteban, your vote.
Yes.
Lisa, your vote.
Aye.
Now, the vote, we're going to do the vote for management. Malika, your vote.
Aye.
Tony, your vote.
Aye.
Matthew, your vote.
Aye.
Paul, your vote.
Aye.
Hetty, your vote.
Aye.
The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
Thank you. We can move on to action item 4, committee report 2522 on the budget.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So this item is a budget-related item from the layoff, or from the city's budget process and the positions that were identified for layoff. So in our overall department, there are over 70 positions identified that were filled for layoff. 5 of those positions landed within my division, within the employee benefits division. And all 5 ended up landing in the LAWell/LiveWell programs, just by the position numbers that were identified. So on page 2 of the report, the positions identified in red are the positions that were identified for layoff through the process of the proposed budget. The employee benefits division itself has had a lot of changes over the years. Deferred comp had broken off as from away from this division, so now they're on their separate division. The financial services section that you see in the middle of the org chart had gone over to full personnel department back in 2010, 11, somewhere around there, as a centralized effort, and then I brought them back into this division because that's where they do the work about in 2020. But overall, the module of the LOL program that you see on the right-hand side has stayed pretty much the same number of positions since this program had become the IRS covered program that it did back in 1997. So a cut of this many positions to the program would be detrimental, and it would have created a situation where a lot of services would be cut. We wouldn't be able to produce the amount of work that's been traditionally done for this program. So through the budget process, a recommendation was made back through a budget memo to be able to have the positions identified here for the LAWell program and the LiveWell program in red to be funded out of the Benefits Trust Fund as an offset to the recommendation. The budget memo that was released by the CAO on May 7th concurred with that recommendation and said that recommended that the Benefits Trust Fund actually cover those positions so that it could no longer be slated for layoff. Action item A covers that recommendation. So that covers those positions one for one. Out of these 5 that are identified, actually 2 of them are already reimbursed by the fund. So this addition or this action in item A is only adding 3 positions to the prior action that the JLMBC just approved for reimbursement in this overall concept. Because this happened, because the city is going through a structural change effort, and because this effort is somewhat clear to say that these positions are not exempt from the overall concept of staffing reduction, item B of this recommendation is just to cover every position that supports the LAL program or LIVWell program together. That on the org chart on page 2 would be everything that doesn't have everything to the right of the commute well label. So the LiveWell line, the financial services line, the LAWell line, all those positions should be covered. And to speak to the prior action item that JLMBC just adopted, a portion of those are already done. So on the bottom of page 3, a chart is identified where it's just the regular staffing chart that you see in the project activities report that comes through the JLMBC on a routine basis. The positions highlighted in bold are the ones that are not covered by action A of this report or are already reimbursed by the trust fund itself already. So it is an either or item. It's the JLMBC can choose to go with the smaller action of just following the recommendation of the budget memo and reimbursing the trust fund for the staffing positions identified in red, or you could take an action to cover every position that supports the JLMBC. I mean, that supports the LAWell, LAWell and LiveWell programs. Yes, questions?
Talking 3 versus 5?
So that's item A, correct. So out of these 2 actions that are on page 1 of this recommendation, on page 1 of this report, recommendation A is for 5 positions. 2 of them are already reimbursed by the fund. So you're only adding 3 positions. Item B would be every position within that serves the program. So it's either 3 positions that you're agreeing to add to the reimbursement of the fund or more than 3.
So the initial proposed layoffs included 2 positions that were funded not by the general fund already?
That were funded by the trust fund, or reimbursed by the trust fund, correct.
And we're including those in the event that they were...
That was part of the action. So the action of the budget memo did not necessarily recognize that those positions were already being reimbursed by the fund. Same thing with the process of the layoff. As we've seen that lots of other departments had positions that were special funded identified for layoff. So even though it is only 3 positions being added to the fund, should the JLMBC approve recommendation A, the construct is still the 5 that were identified for layoff. So we're reconfirming with action A the recommendation for the budget memo to remove those 5 positions from the layoff list.
Forgive me to clarify this in your report, but action B, would that cover changes to the current structure? So
No.
right now we have a fixed structure, but if there are positions added into the future, in the future, our action today would not cover those positions.
That is correct, and it's not covered in the report. So any new position that would be added would have to still be acted on by this committee to add it for funding. This recommendation would only be the existing. The percentages, though, just to follow that point up further, the percentages here are estimated percentages. It would fluctuate or change over time. Those would all still be actions that would be confirmed by the committee.
And this would be only for this fiscal year.
No, this would be moving forward. So it would be fiscal year 25-26 on. So the report that the committee just adopted in the prior action, we would just add these new positions to that report, whatever's adopted today, if anything's adopted today, moving forward, starting with the first quarter of the next fiscal year, July to September.
This is more of a curiosity question than one directly related to this. So given that I saw maybe there's 6 or there may be a little bit more that were bolded there. And only a percentage of them is currently funded by the LAWell. So we would take the first one from 40 up to 100. But and this was curiosity. This must mean that we're going to free up a little bit more money to the general fund. Or not. It's okay that it's not, because it's not directly relevant to us, but I'm just curious if we're bringing in those costs to a non-general fund, then I'm just curious.
So this fund, the Benefits Trust Fund, is a little bit unique as a special fund. And so in that concept, it wouldn't necessarily dollar for dollar free up additional money. It is a complicated answer.
Then that's okay. It's not directly relevant to what we're doing here for purposes of us. I think it makes, I'm comfortable with B, so.
I'm not sure I quite understand the difference between A and B. So A is 5, but B is also 5.
So yes, in a way. So what you could consider, and I probably should have put this out better. So if you look on the chart on page 3 and 4, the positions that are identified in bold are not considered an A. So the my position, the division chief, the governance wellness senior 2, the accounting director supervisor, the benefit analyst that's technically vacant with the 120-day, our 2 billing staff support, our member services rep on the back of page 4, and our accounting clerk. Those positions are not included. They are not included at all in action A. They're not being reimbursed at all. So those are the ones to add.
But they're
Out of
for layoff on the part.
Not yet. No, no, they're not. No, they're not. Sorry. No.
Yeah, I got it. But it makes sense. If we're looking at this rather than why don't we look at it structurally, it might make sense to bring these all under.
And then, so, okay, so I kind of get that part. And then is A just for the fiscal year, and then B is for,
Ongoing.
okay.
No, both of them would be ongoing. So this would be an action to whatever just like the previous positions that we have that are being reimbursed by the fund.
Right.
The action to reimburse them from the fund does not have a sunset date until there's an action to reverse that.
May I ask, so you put a 1.1 million annual guesstimate on rolling everyone into the trust fund.
And that would only be for those bolded positions that are highlighted in the chart on page 3-4.
Estimate of choice A?
Yes. So and I didn't do a good job on describing that very well either. The estimate on the bottom of page 2, the $660,000 figure, is for all 5 positions. 2 of those are already being reversed. Those equate to about $150,000 a year, close to $200,000. So you subtract that, so it's around $400,000 additional annually. that would be added to the trust fund for the remaining 3 positions.
And so we never see the financial statements of this trust fund in this.
You see the tail end of it, and it happens quite quickly. So that is an action that we have on our plate to do further differently. So there was always an intent to bring like an actual budget process to this committee. We have not done that yet fully. So you see bits and pieces of the overall budget expenditures, and then under the ad code, the trust fund does require this committee to give a reconciliation. And that reconciliation goes forward to council for approval within 90 days of the close of the fiscal year. So you see that document. It's a very simplified document though, and only happens at one time. So it is something that we're working on to change so that there's much more finances that are at your in front of you and being discussed by you on a more routine basis.
But I think I heard you say that the CAO has already determined that the trust fund could handle.
This trust fund is a unique trust fund, and yes, the budget memo identifies that it.
The budget memo identified the 400,000 would be easily absorbed, or the 1 million, 1.1 million.
No, they actually have the number of the 660,000 because they're still looking at it from the purview of all 5 positions instead of just 3 that are not being reimbursed.
But their 2 cents was based on just the 2, not option B.
Correct. Option B is not part of the memo. It's not part of the budget process at all. It's something that I'm throwing in there out of left field. Option A is the actual recommendation from the budget memo, actual recommendation to move forward to reverse the layoff action.
The simple question is, do we know if there's enough money to do option B?
That is, yes.
Without
We know, or the answer?
without harming the funds they're supposed to be paying for our plan.
Like for future years too.
Yeah,
It's gonna be able to.
Right.
So
Is it
I think there
sustainable?
needs to be a clarification on what the trust fund is, the structure. I think that's where the
Okay.
confusion is coming from, because it's not a trust fund, it's
Right.
special trust. So I think that needs some clarification as to, because there's a lot of confusion, I think, around that, like where's the money coming from? And
Okay.
I think that's the questions about sustainability. So I think that would be helpful.
So the Benefits Trust Fund is part of the bigger over human resources budget. It is a massive amount of money covering multiple programs, including the LOL program. It has its overall budget itself is, I believe, close to 900,000 this year, pretty close to it. Under the ad code, anything that the Benefits Trust Fund uses is to pay for premiums, expenditures, administrative costs for the programs of LAWell, as well as the other programs that it's identified to cover. Money into that trust fund is transferred from the general fund. It is not a special source that's coming from participants. Money is transferred from the general fund into the trust fund to pay the liability and ensure that there's adequate amount to be able to cover the premiums and the other expenditures that this program, as well as the other programs identified, have as an obligation. So the reason why I'm saying there is enough money to be able to do so, this amount is a very tiny, small fraction in the overall expenditures of that fund. In the concept, in the 900 something million dollars that it's identified to expend, 1.1, or these figures are extremely trivial. And in the intent of the fund to be able to pay its obligations, these positions need to be there. We can't perform the work if these positions are not there. We wouldn't be able to pay the premiums if our financial services staff is not there to pay them. That group of 5 people, 3 of them do the billing that your employees get on a regular basis, and those other 2 pay $400 and $600 million worth of premium on a regular basis every year. So if we didn't have these positions, that work wouldn't get done. So that's why it is a complicated and unique fund, and why the recommendation is the recommendation.
Every year when you're putting together a budget and you're looking at how you're gonna be able to fund your stuff the following year, you'd be evaluating this, so.
Correct.
Years down the line, if it were ever to run to a point that you're worried about it, you'd have to fix it before you could budget for the staff the following year.
Correct. Yeah, and that's a great point too, right? There's a massive amount of budget monitoring that goes to manage this extremely large fund. and salary reimbursements like this, all the other factors are being pulled into that. It is looked at extremely crucially every year when we're going through the budget process.
Has council looked at both these recommendations? There's no problem with it?
Council has not, just A.
So then,
And if you go with B, how will you reconcile, the budget finance committee with council, including what the B recommendation?
I'm not sure I understand. And also make sure you speak to the mic. I'm sorry.
Because I think it's gonna give you a savings if they've already budgeted to put it into, to not put into the fund and pay for those positions with general fund. Then next year you're gonna have a surplus. If we move it into the fund, you'll have the additional money that was designated for it out of the general fund available to you.
Oh, in theory, I think I understand where you're both going. This fund though, there is, because so many things move on a regular basis. We have movement of employees, we have movement of fluctuations. And right now there's no understanding yet of what the premium dollars for next year are going to be, because there's not been an action to set those. So it's constantly fluid, unfortunately, kind of in how it works. So in a regular, if it was more static and predictable budget, then I would agree. Because this one has so many different moving pieces, it's less of a concern, still a concern, because we need to be very mindful of the expenditures that we have. And there's other actions we're going to be bringing forward this committee about trying to reduce our expenditures. And it is an either or. This is also not a time that is the only time this committee can make this choice. It is for A. A is kind of an hour or not, but B can be taken and reconsidered at another time.
then if we choose B, do you have to get another, since A was approved by the budget memo, would that require going back and getting?
It would be unrelated to the budget in that particular aspect.
Okay.
It would be similar to, so one of the positions that is identified here on chart A, on page 2, the senior BA 1 that's identified as red. That is a position that we newly added about a year ago in this same process. That's the position that we identified for the HIPAA compliance officer. And we said we wanted to add a position brand new to be able to do this work. We can't do it without that position. And this committee did that. And that position wouldn't have existed before. We didn't consult the budget process before we did that. We took that action first, and then we added it to the budget later.
I think the whole purpose of B is trying to protect you for 26.
Correct.
It's best to take the staff and put it in the lockbox.
That is, you hit it right on exactly where it was coming from.
All the positions that were already funded by the budget from were slated or identified for layoff anyways.
That is very true.
I don't know if we're ready.
Do we have any other questions or?
No.
No, I think we're good.
I have another question, sorry.
No,
I am curious, obviously these are the two options, one or the other, that are being presented. What's the recommendation of the personnel department?
Personnel department, me personnel department, or personnel department overall personnel department?
Personnel
I will say that I think the only curiosity that I had is the general health of the trust fund at the end of the fiscal year. I think option B would be an overall benefit to the personnel department. Ultimately, because it protects the positions, it can, because I think Marlene's point, or whoever made the point, these positions that were covered by the trust fund were slated for layoff. But it's an added layer of protection, and I think it's a good argument to protect them in the event that they are slated for layoff in the future, saying that these are funded by a pot of money that is set aside, that is controlled by this group to determine what positions it wants to have to operate the programs and what funding it wants to use to actually fund the programs themselves. So I think ultimately B, to me, seems like it gives this body and the human, the benefits world its own power and control to make its own decisions. And I think ultimately that's a benefit to the personnel department, and I think it's a benefit to this body.
So, just short of a motion.
It's just about, yeah. All right, do we have any other comment, questions?
Just one last time, on that org chart that's up right now, which positions did you want to move under? Did you want?
So-
be?
So,
Because you
so
said billing people, that's everyone under the financial services?
correct. So if you're, if to try to make it simplified, item B, if you look at the, to the left where it says Senior Benefit Analyst 2 and it has commute well, the line of commute well, take that out. Everything else is covered. The financial services section has a varying percentage, so it's not going to be 100% for everybody. Same with me, I'm not 100%. But all of those other positions, everything that's not under the commute well line, supports the LA Well and Live Well program to some degree. And so this action would be to take whatever that work is that they do and fund it by the fund.
Which is the 1.1, right?
Correct. That's the 1.1 in addition to the other figure here, the 400 that we had talked about before as of the addition.
It's also important to realize those positions are critical because they are overseeing and oversight over hundreds of.
Yes.
$1 billion investment. Really good return. Versus mistakes being made or whatever. At the same time, employees not getting their benefit.
I'll make a motion if nobody wants to. I would move to, adopt item B.
Second.
Sounds good, we've got a motion and a second, let's go ahead and do a vote.
Okay, we will now begin the roll call for both the employee organizations and then with management. Shauna, your vote.
Aye.
Marlene, your vote.
Aye.
Chad, your vote.
Aye.
Esteban, your vote.
Yes.
Lisa, your vote.
Aye.
Malika, your vote.
Aye.
Tony, your vote.
Aye.
Matthew, your vote.
Aye.
Paul, your vote.
Aye.
Hetty, your vote.
Aye.
The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
Thank you. Move on to. Action item 5, committee report 2523.
Okay, I will be presenting this report. So this report is we are bringing back a report on the updated draft language change to the subsidy maximum authority. At the last JLMBC meeting, the JLMBC had directed staff to make some additional revisions to the proposed language to under the Los Angeles Administrative Code section 4.307. And then to bring it back to the JLMBC at a future meeting for reconsideration. So this is that report. So at the last meeting, there were some concerns brought up by the JLMBC, in a situation where if the JLMBC fails to come to an agreement on a new monthly subsidy amount, what would happen? Because the prior proposed language did not really address that clearly. So staff has gone back and looked into this and have two options for the JLMBC's consideration. So under option A, in the event that the JLMBC does not approve an updated monthly subsidy amount, staff is proposing that the default medical plan subsidy rate amount will apply for those employees who are governed by this ordinance, so the non-represented full-time employees and the half-time employees. Under option B, in the event that the JLMBC not approve an updated monthly subsidy amount, staff is proposing that the prior year medical plan family subsidy rate amount apply instead. So under option A, every year as part of the new benefit year, staff determines a subsidy rate for each option, a medical plan option tier for the default plan. So with option A, if you know that the default rates will be used will apply in the event that you know the JLMBC does not approve the new rates. Under option B, currently we do have several MOUs who do not have that are expired and do not have updated health subsidy provisions. So in those situations, the practice has been to use the last approved amount, subsidy amount as the default, as the health subsidy amount for each subsequent year until there is a new MOU in force. So it's with, so under that concept, we're applying that similar concept under option B, where if a new subsidy amount is not approved by the JLMBC, the prior year amount will be used for the upcoming year.
Prior amount or prior action? That's not exactly what our MOU say. Our MOU say that in the event that a successor is not negotiated before the term is expired, the terms and conditions survive. Which
Sorry, that was my intent.
but for MOUs tying into the Kaiser family rate, that means the Kaiser family rate and all the increases keep on going until a successor is negotiated. Are you saying that whatever figure was hard negotiated, that would succeed until a new action was taken?
What do you mean by hard negotiating?
Well, I mean, aren't we setting a dollar amount?
Yeah, at this table.
Right, for the non-reps.
Yes.
So if we decide not to increase that, then that dollar amount would survive until, yeah. That's problematic. It's problematic because if rates increase and this body doesn't convene in time or doesn't make a decision when the rates increase, then non-reps are going to be left pulling back.
I think it's problematic anyways, breaking up.
But but your concern, that is just with option B. Is there any concern with option A?
That would go Wyoming subsidy amount.
Well,
The default.
we would use the default plans for whatever tier the non-rep employee enrolls into. So if
Which is right now Kaiser, but in the event that it changes.
so in this under option A, we're not tying it to a specific plan. We're just tying it to the default rate.
But further along in our meeting, we're talking about the default being based on the zip code of the employee. So you're saying that might vary then from employee to employee.
That the rate, Paul, correct me if I'm off here, but under that concept later, that will determine, I think it would affect the default plan that the employee is assigned to, but the subsidy rate should still be the same from default to default. I mean, the default rate would still be unaffected.
I think it could go either way. I think if I'm understanding correctly.
Does that mean that then people would have different subsidy amounts based on their default, or does that? I'm confused by that.
Well, I think the reason why I'm saying that is just because this body hasn't made a decision on default yet. So under the current structure, and the next report is going to say a different thing for default, but under the current structure, there is one default, and there would be one maximum, which is the same concept. So under the current rules, it would be one and all, as Chung was presenting.
But if that change was made, and that change hasn't been made yet, so I would have to, while we're doing this one, we have to consider both of those.
Fair.
So that concerns me to say default, if the potential is that then you have different subsidy amounts for individual people just because of the zip code they live in. That's concerning. that feels weird to me to have people who's like. Yeah, they could be working like one desk apart and have totally different. Subsidy amounts because they live somewhere different. That's, I don't know about that.
Is there a reason why we're taking this up before? I mean, I know we had it on the last agenda, but without knowing what the default might be, that's a little difficult to make that decision, intelligently. Also, are you trying to implement this for 2026 plan year?
I think that we need to still get it passed.
So 27?
Get approved, get council approval for ordinance change first. So there's a possibility that it could be implemented in time for the 2026 benefit year.
It's still a long road to go.
There would have to be notification made for the non.
Yeah, that's true. It have to be all that complication.
You guys should,
At least for
We can bring this to subcommittee for further discussion.
yeah, I think,
The question is, what are we looking for? We're looking for a global plan information or a dollar number to make sure that, some groups are not shortchanged because of inflation and increase in premium. That's going to be determined. What are we, what we're looking
We're looking to, move forward with a change to the subsidy language as it exists now. We do feel that, the easiest step forward is to change the subsidy language, in the Los Angeles Administrative Code right now, and then, work with the city and, the employee organizations, to change the individual MOU languages down the line. We'd like to move away from tying the subsidy to a specific carrier's medical plan and change language to allow the city to have more flexibility in changing this, in determining a subsidy amount that, meets its needs each year. So this change for the ordinance is an attempt to move in that direction. And, option A and option B was made to address some concerns that was brought at the last meeting. There was concern as to what would happen if the JLMBC fails to, is unable to come to an agreement on a new subsidy amount. What would the monthly subsidy rate be for those for those non-represented employees that are governed by this ordinance.
I hate to suggest another committee, but it does sound like it sounds like there's still a lot of discussion and, we've looked at this a couple of times and had a couple of revisions. And maybe we do need to have an ad hoc look at it and, really piece through it a bit more. Because I hate to have you keep coming back with like, oh, make another draft revision, make another, and it does sound like there's still a lot of discussion around this, even with the changes. So what are people's thoughts on that? Not to add another committee to everything, but.
I'm not opposed to it, but I do have a question after we consider your idea.
Oh, yeah, no worries. You can go ahead and ask it.
No, I don't want to interrupt you because you have momentum here, Shauna. So, although
Such
my
a-
Thursdays are ruined for now until forever, so I'm volunteering a committee that I will likely not be a part of. If you meet on Thursday.
So, I was asked last time, why did I vote no? Right? And I still have two main concerns. One concern is that I don't really understand what it is we're trying to accomplish. Second is, I think it's for labor anyway, it's gonna create a vulnerability. Because on the one hand, optimistically, it's like, oh, we could set the subsidy even higher, than the nicer rate. But really, it also means it could go lower, and I think half the room is under pressure to keep costs down, and the other half is under pressure to get the best deal for their members as possible. So there is a high probability that we might not be able to come up with a decision on a subsidy amount in a 2-hour meeting once a month, right? So, and the other thing is, I'm just saying, and then, although I agree with the idea of not having a vendor baked into the admin code, I still, my hesitation has been and still is, I think there's vulnerability there for the labor hand. So I would vote for a committee. But I don't know, you know.
My question is a little different. Why, I understand why the language is necessarily different as far as the default medical plan subsidy rate between represented employees here at the city as opposed to non-represented. Why is that necessary right now that we're doing that? Why can't we just benchmark it to where everybody else is and move on?
Oh, go ahead.
Well, currently for the non-represented group, it is benchmarked specifically to the Kaiser family rate.
Okay, so then to Paul's point, why, so is the vulnerability not only that Paul mentioned, not only for the non-represented employees, but also the represented employees?
Well, so the problem that we face, so the language that currently is in the ag code that we're trying to change has been copied into every single MOU verbatim. And that happened 30 something years ago. So that language still stays. That language has to be negotiated individual by every single MOU. So we tried, we thought, how could we create a situation where there's an action across the board and everybody's treated equally, and it doesn't seem to be a path. So we had said, we're going to try to change the AGCO language, for lack of a better term, as the test trial, and make something work there. And then hopefully that could be successful enough that everyone liked and copy, just like the original way, copied over into every single MOU afterwards. I think there needed to be an effort in seeing that whatever language you come up with actually works and those employees aren't seeing negative reaction. It does create a tier system. We've had a tier system though in the past. It's not something we haven't had before, but it's a tier system in theory. In the concept that we put forward, this body, if you can agree on a figure, would create a figure that could, in theory, match what's happening everywhere else, and there wouldn't be a tier, or at least there'd be a tier that's exactly the same number. But that's the conundrum that we fell into. Is we have 40 different tables, and they're all completely unique.
You should be careful what you wish for. Indeed, this is a proof of concept, but I disagree with, this is a proof of concept to show you what you could adopt. It's only a proof of concept to show you there can be a different way. I don't necessarily agree that every single MOU should default to the same thing if that's not what you want. If you represent, your MOU is literally comprised of 6 individuals. We have some of those. And all of them get together and say, we only want minimal coverage for ourselves. We're not married. We have no children. Then that's what they want to do. But it's not a proof of concept to then come to you and say, you see what we did for non-reps? Elizabeth, you should. Well, it's not even me. That's not even a discussion. Because it's 2 entirely different forms. All we're doing is saying, let's change the administrative code and come up with some other type of system, not tied to a specific vendor, not beholden to a vendor, but come up with some other system that is workable as a way of demonstrating that we don't have to do what we're doing here. Whether you adopt that or not, entirely yours and my business when we get together in 2028. And I could put something on the table and you could say no, and you could put something alternate on the table and say no, and if we don't have an agreement, then it is what it is, and keep the guys at family rate and move it.
My only concern, and this is obviously complicated subject. I represent members that work for other public sector employers where there is a tiered system. And the insurance that's offered, the subsidy that's offered varies greatly, and it leads to a lot of problems. Right,
Well,
where
and
you have a certain class of workers that feel entitled to much grander benefits than a lot of rank and file men, people that work for this particular agency that I'm not gonna mention. And it's problematic.
And that's why I say careful what you wish for, because if we're successful here, it demonstrates that you could have different tiers. You could do that. Now, whether you have an interest in that, I'm not sure we have an interest
So
in it.
the thing is, there's two different things we're speaking about. One is whether or not we should have a tiered medical system based on a particular employee class or what they bargained for.
Right.
And the other is whether or not the rate should be benchmarked to a particular vendor or not. Those two things are very, very, very different things. So, and not mutually exclusive. And so I think I like Shauna's idea.
Life might be a
This is
strong
really,
word.
this is really,
Yeah.
I personally will not advocate for, I like the fact that, the highest paid person here in the city enjoys the same benefits that a rank and file member does. And I think, it puts us all in the same boat together, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. So deviating from that is I've just seen problems with it. I don't think we should have a class system as it relates to health benefits here at the city.
There are also lower paid employees that are non-represented. So we don't want to see them impacted either.
Ad hoc? Is that, are we good with that? Or,
Sorry,
yeah,
the agenda item is kind of specific. So the action this committee can take is to not consider the recommendation that's being proposed on the agenda item.
Mhm.
If the decision is to create an ad hoc committee, this will have to come back in a separate meeting. We're recommending the creation of an ad hoc committee to study this issue. But the issue on the table is whether to accept the recommendation or not.
I would move to not accept the recommendation of the tribe and direct staff to bring us back, a subsequent recommendation for that.
Second.
all right, sounds good. Let's go ahead and do roll call vote, please.
Okay, we're going to start the roll call for vote, beginning with employee organizations, followed by management. Shauna, your vote.
Aye.
Marlene, your vote.
Aye.
Chad, your vote.
Aye.
Esteban, your vote.
Yeah.
Malika, your vote.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. Lisa, your vote. Matthew, your vote. Paul, your vote.
Aye.
Heather, your vote.
Aye.
I don't think we
call
Tony, Mr. Oyster. This is not right. We could have Mr. Oyster.
Sorry about that. Tony, your vote. The vote is unanimous. The motion does not pass.
Thank you.
Please schedule them on Thursday.
The recommendation for ad hoc is at whatever subsequent meeting. But then we determine who's on the ad hoc or whatever the process is, yeah,
I believe that has been the process.
Okay.
I
figure it out.
yeah, I don't know. I need to check to see if we still have any existing subcommittees. But
I thought we did, but I can't, I don't see records, so we'll probably have to start.
Design, stuff like that, though, is there one?
Yeah, I think for the next meeting, those details will be.
Okay.
And to the extent there is an existing ad hoc committee that have the jurisdiction to cover this issue, I think that could be brought in.
And if there's not, Mr. City Attorney, would it be permissible for staff to inquire with JLMBC members on their interest in participating on that ahead of the meeting?
They can get the survey of information.
Correct, just ask,
Yeah.
are you interested in serving on the committee, yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to the next item. What the big one? Committee report 25-24.
Hello, everybody. So last meeting, we had told the JLMBC that we are going to bring forth at this May 15th meeting our recommendation for everything related to the RFP. So it'd be the recommendation for the actual selection of vendors, as well as the proposed changes to section 2.5 of the RFP, which were the proposed plan changes that we had discussed. In looking at what is going to be presented for both of those items together, it became very clear that's too much for one meeting. And so we have split that up. This is, and if you go to the top of page 3, our new timeline for this conversation is just the plan change recommendations that are part of the RFP identified in section 2.5. And then the subsequent meeting will be the recommendations for actual selection in that finding. As of right now, we can talk about this more further, but as of right now, the recommended timeline is that would happen at the May 29th meeting, the actual recommendation for selection. Then the same timeline that we discussed last meeting would happen. You can choose to have oral presentations called, which we could do at the very next week on the 5th, have no presentations called, and there's a couple different options which we'll cover when we actually present that material. This conversation is focused on just those plan changes identified in the RFP. We had talked about those plan changes for quite a while. They are focused around cost. That is the main focus of those, but we didn't make a hard decision on those. We're bringing this forward now in the first part of this conversation because those are crucial depending on what the committee decides on being able to be successfully programmed. We need to have our TELUS third-party record keeper start programming right away with some of these recommendations if they are adopted. On page 2 is the typical calendar of what happens. So in every plan year, when the plan's adopted, that is where we go to our record keeper and we say, hey, here's the program, look at how great it is. And we're going to program it into the system, get it all tested over a couple months, and then launch. Actually, we launch in September, technically, for the October enrollment. The changes that we're presenting in this report are very large scale. And so the testing period that you see on the chart on page 2 that typically happens in July and August needs more time. So that's why we've put this in the forefront. In the concept of cost, the changes that were considered, we're really looking overall at where are employees going, what is happening with employees, how is enrollment, our traditional aspect of enrollment and our plan rules, affecting how plan costs develop, how plan costs exist because of where people settle. If we look at historically, starting on page 3, the profile of enrollment back in 2012, that was a big year of change. That is when we shifted over between 2012 and 2013 over to adopt a 4th plan. And then a few years later, we went to 5 plans. So under this model in 2012, when we only had 3 health plans, you saw that it was 51% Kaiser, and then 5% cash in lieu, and the remaining 40+% were mixed up between the 2 other health plans. Now, the top of page 4, Kaiser has grown to 63%. Our cash in lieu population, and this is still the same data that was presented a couple months ago from TELUS. The cash in lieu population is still pretty close to that 5%, dipped a little lower, and then the remaining plans pick up the rest. So Kaiser has grown significantly over this time, but they've also been the default for the majority of that time as well. So we're putting a lot in our process of how we allow for new hire enrollment. We're putting members, a good population of them, into that default plan because they're not taking any action. And that was identified, at least for the data that TELUS had presented to us back at their April meeting. The overall enrollments, everybody that was a brand new enrollment hire, and there's over 2,000 of them that year, 32% were non-action defaults. And we know we have a number of employees in the city that don't necessarily have a big, strong opinion on their healthcare. Mostly the young ones that maybe are not, I hate to say young, but maybe the ones that they're not expecting to go to the doctor. might not play an active role into choosing their health coverage. There's always going to be a percentage of somebody. We have a lot of employees that are very actively concerned about their healthcare, and they should be. But there is still a population that doesn't have a strong opinion, and we are the ones making the choice through our enrollment actions. So that's kind of the premise of where a lot of the section 2.5 recommendations came from. Those are repeated on page 5 just for reference. So we had to change the default, change the subsidy authority, change to enrollment limits, change the cash in lieu, change to passive enrollment, and change to dependent eligibility audit. So out of all of these options, the committee has already moved forward on about 3 or so of those. There's a couple that have not taken action, and that's what this report is trying to cover. So default plan. We would like to recommend that moving forward, new hires and rehires, which would be anybody who does not have an action to take and is identified as a default, that default be the lowest zip code plan based on their geographic location. So a great example is our current menu. Our current menu shows a regional plan that is in many of the past years has been cheaper than the default plan that we've elected, but to put employees in. But that's because we've only had a past history of having one default plan for everybody, not having multiple. So in having multiple default plans, we could put somebody into the lowest cost plan that is available to the city, even if it's not available to everybody, because it's available to that individual based on their home zip code. Our third-party administrator says they can do this. They've done it before. We've seen practices in other employers that do this, that there is geographic location-based defaults that vary by individual. So the concept would be a new employee is hired. Our employee comes back from wherever they went back to the city. The address that they put into their Workday profile when they get hired is the zip code that gets passed over to our record keeper, and our record keeper assigns the default plan as the cheapest plan based on that zip code. And that's what's put on their offer, yes.
And they would be assigned this plan, assuming that during open enrollment, they don't make an election.
The open enrollment will be separate. But yes, that is true. They can make election.
They'll default into the plan on initial employment prior to
they would
first open enrollment period.
They would default in the plan after their election period had ended. So our overall offer rules are not proposed to be changed in this concept. When a new hire comes in, we make them an offer. They have 60 days to make an election. If they don't make an election at 60 days, then they go in the default plan on day 61.
All right.
So this one is just saying in the best cost for the city, let's put that default action into the cheapest available plan for the city.
And employee only coverage, right?
Correct. It's employee only coverage. And just to, paint the picture fully, this could be a different plan every single year. Every plan year, we have different rates that go through renewal. So the default option for someone living in Orange County could be different for plan year 2026 than plan year 2027, and so on, depending on whatever the cheapest plan is for that region or that zip code.
What happens if they move during the year?
It would, there is a ability, and it's currently in the plan, it's just not something that that happens too often. There is an ability under rules, if someone moves out of their service area, they can change their plan if they move out of that service area. But it has to be, I am moving from a zip code that this plan services to a zip code that it doesn't service. So typically it happens if someone goes long distance, and we've had that happen before, where someone moves from Los Angeles to Bakersfield, and they can no longer seek the services of that plan. And that's a qualifying life event as long as they report it within 30 days of their move.
I'm working through this, so this might sound jumbled, I'm sorry. So, somebody lives on the west side, God bless them, and then things are expensive, so they move to Inland Empire. And maybe that's not fair to say, but I'm gonna say it. And so, how would they know, like, what would be the trigger? Does something pop up? Do they know, like, oh no, I need to do something? Does it automatically, do they typically report their address change? How does that?
It is not currently set up as a notification event on our end. It would be the employee has to take the action and say, hey, I moved to this area and I don't think I can see my healthcare provider. It's not here. And so that's when they would report it to us, and we would verify that their zip code is not covered under that plan. and allow the event. But it's not an automatic trigger event like some of our other ones. It is not a notification event on any claims. And it is also the employee's choice necessarily that they think that is an event for them. Maybe them moving there is not an issue. They had no desire to make a change.
So if we did that, there would need to be some kind of communication to employees so that they understand that change, because I could imagine somebody just assuming like, well, I guess, I have to wait until open enrollment, and they just don't know because that's not something they've had to deal with before. And I could see somebody just not realizing they would need to make a change and actively do something, or that they were able to, and then just kind of sucking it up and not going to the doctor, or traveling, across town to go if they needed to. So there would need to be some, I think, communication around that, but okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
Under the current plan we have, if they fall, are they automatically going to single coverage?
Correct. Yeah. Default is always employee only. So it's a default for medical, default for dental. Vision is tied to the medical, and there's the basic life and basic disability. Those are the 5 benefits that a default gets.
Or you have the family, healthcare for the family, and you find out they don't have.
Unfortunately, if they defaulted, there's nothing they can do until open enrollment for the next year, unless they have a life event that happened after that.
I have a couple of questions. I know it's further down in the recommendations that would maybe take care of my question, but we don't know what's gonna happen with those. So this is not gonna change them every year, right?
No.
It's just upon hire, but in the
Correct.
second or third or fourth years, that rate may not be the lowest rate anymore.
Correct. To that point, it also doesn't prevent choice, right? There is nothing to prevent somebody from saying, hey, I want to pick the higher price plan.
Right.
And to do that subsequent later on after default happened through open enrollment for another life event. But correct, the default action is a point in time under this current recommendation for number 1. And so there could be an action to default somebody in 2026. Into a plan that is the cheapest for the city, and then it's not the cheapest for the city in 2027. And under number 1, that is the way it works.
I thought I read somewhere in this report, I thought it was about this number, that there's a high percentage of those folks that never leave that default plan that they're put into.
That's what we suspect, right? That we know based on the data that TELUS had provided that 33% or so of overall enrollments were defaulted in. We also know and we suspect that a lot of those defaults that are defaulting those plans are not making active changes. They're not moving when we put them in there. There can be a percentage of them that actually wanted that plan and just didn't want to take an action, and it just happened. Those are unknowns, but it is their physical enrollment of the plan was an action that the city took by defaulting them.
Can I ask how they get their options right now in new hire? Is it still that mailed big package? Is it electronic?
It is still mailed. It is still considered. So we haven't brought communication changes to this committee yet. That's slated for next. Right now we are still producing paper and mailing paper as our only form of regular communications. It is still our legal form of communication until we've created a formal opt-out option where an employee can say, I no longer want to get my legal requirements through notification requirements through mail. That hasn't happened yet. So everybody gets the paper form.
When they get that paper form, do they have to complete it and return it in paper form, or they have the option to go online at that point?
There actually isn't an option to return it. We don't accept paper, so they have to call or go online. So that concept is just for new hire, rehire employees. In this overall concept, though, of knowing that we've had for decades or for years and years at least defaulted employees into coverage in this aspect, there has been that same process of passive enrollment. So I default somebody into a plan in 2023. They are still in that same plan now, unless they took an action to change. There was nothing that reset them. There was nothing to do anything different with them. In the concept we talked about just now too, that same thing would apply. So we don't know necessarily that person that got defaulted back in 2023 really wanted to be in that plan, or that it would be the cheapest for the city when coverages change over time. So the next portion is talking about changing passive enrollment into an active enrollment. It is something the city has not, at least that this plan has not done, to my knowledge, at all. But it is something that employers do on a routine basis. I'm told from many different aspects from our consultants and from our third-party administrator that there are many employers that do an active enrollment concept. Typically, in an active enrollment concept, the employer has a waive option where there is no insurance provided if the employee doesn't take an action. That's definitely not going to work for the city population. It's not something that we want to recommend, at least not at this time or in the near future. But the concept of active enrollment is enticing and is looking like somewhat beneficial to the overall concept of city population for our staff for multiple reasons. A big reason is people taking an active concern or active look at what their benefit package is. We have so many examples of times where we've changed a benefit and we've done all our communications that we can possibly think of doing. And people come to us a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, and saying, my card doesn't work anymore. Well, it's because you don't have that insurance anymore. And they just ignored us. We have taught people really, really well. Ignore anything that comes from us if you like your benefits. And they've lived with that. So the active enrollment concept, go ahead.
Question. Well, you were just going to answer your question. Go ahead. I cut you off.
So the active enrollment concept is a step forward to try to get people to take an action and pay more attention to their coverage and physically do something. Go ahead.
Or what?
We did not want to introduce a waive option. We don't want to take away something from someone's ability to seek care. So our proposal would be to take that same default concept and apply it to everybody who is currently enrolled into coverage. So we would default everybody to and their currently enrolled dependents. So no one will need access to coverage. We would default them all to the lowest cost of the plan available for that plan year. And they would actively take an effort to change that plan back to the plan that if they wanted to a different plan.
More people.
Well, so
the volume of calls you're going to get. I mean, people. My experience has been over multiple employers doing this. People don't feel compelled to go to the open enrollment process if they're happy with their current provider, and you're going to have a very, very high volume of people that end up there. And you're going to have continuity of care issues that come up where. That's going to affect people. You're going to have a lot of people that are in the middle of cancer treatment that all of a sudden can't get to their doctor because they didn't actively elect to do that. And those things are very messy and come with liability. And it's a very high volume of calls.
We did take that into consideration, and we talked to our TPA about how this would work. So there's a couple of things that they recommend and a couple of things that we would look at to be able to change for this year if this was the go forward. So our third-party administrator says that they're able to handle active enrollment by putting more people on the phone. Our call center that is with that third-party administrator is an open call center. They can have more. Additionally to just regular calls, the online system that people use, which we would highly recommend that people go to, can change from our current experience. So the current experience in the record keeping system, when you go online, there's multiple screens that you click on, benefit by benefit, plan by plan, design by design. It takes someone 15 to 20 minutes just to go through a regular process if they know what they want. It's tedious. They have a simplified version that we do. It's called Quick Enroll, where the employee goes on into the profile. You see all your benefits at once of what you're enrolled into. If you want to change something, you click on it. Otherwise, you complete. And they say it could be done in a very quick amount of time. In addition to that level of change, last year, when we did our open enrollment activities, people loved, or at least it seemed very apparent because that was where everyone was going. We had a table for people to enroll in person. And there was a line up the door at every event that we had for people to enroll in person. So having actual physical events where people can come and get their enrollment done seems to be a very beneficial way of trying to address this, as well as a very strong and comprehensive communication plan on what this means.
I think, you have everybody at wanting to get everybody to recognize the value of their city provided benefits, having them more engaged, making that simpler. I just went through this, with another employer, and again, there was a lot of liability issues, continuity of care. When you're getting treatment for a major medical illness, and you're used to having that continuity of care without any active input from you, you're just gonna don't know what you're asking for. That's just, I mean, can it work? Yeah. Can you make it easier? Yeah. It's not worth phone calls and the hand wringing and basically the threats of litigation that follow. People who are told they can't go see their oncologist in the middle of treatment because they didn't actively enroll during the open enrollment period. I mean, all the rest of it sounds great, and we want to know how we can also won't speak for my fellow committee members, but you know, we're all down for helping everybody understand the value of that. But like Paul said earlier, be careful what you ask for. I don't think that the upside minor savings you might have from somebody who doesn't actively re-enroll in their insurance program every year. You know, it's just not worth it. It's from my perspective.
Chad, based on your experience, how long ago did that change happen, and what did the other organization do about it? Did they change back, or did they adjust?
Yes, the answer is, I don't want to get into a bunch of details. You might be able to figure out who it is. It's not real hard. The first two letters start with L and A. It has to be a little bit bigger than this city that we enjoy. But, you know, they have an exclusive, they offer, you know, what they used to offer, exclusive medical benefit for union members, right? That was sponsored by one of the unions. And there was a big problem with just the logistics of handling, right? So inadvertently, union members were denied access to their plan. They had continuity care issues, and this was the end result. And it just was not great. So I spoke my piece. I don't want to dwell on it much longer, but it just created a lot of problems.
So I have three things. Kind of related to that. I haven't seen, I appreciate that, you know, some people have seen this, and, you know, the consultants have let you know that this is, that there are other organizations that do this. From my experience, I have not seen that, and we represent a lot of employers, and we haven't seen any of our employers that I'm aware of do that. Even in small organizations that we work with, anytime that's kind of brought up, we're like, it's a big ask. It's a lot of work. There's always a possibility that someone will be missed. It almost requires really hand-holding every individual person. It's just a lot of work. So that's one piece. Related to that, you know, you mentioned that the administrator has said that they can handle this. I would point out the missed PGs that we've seen over the past few years, when they also said they can handle it and didn't. So I, you know, not to, you know, rain on them, but just to say that, you know, they're at a good place now, but that wasn't the case, you know, right out of the gate. And so I'm a little concerned that we have got them to a good place now. They've staffed up now. But so that's part of my hesitation is coming from that, is looking at the history where they said, yes, we can, and then didn't. And now they can, but now this is a big increase in what they would be doing. And so if that's how quickly can they really staff up in this very short period of time, and can that really be done? So I do have a little bit of, you know, once bitten, twice shy about that. And the other piece is kind of both of those together. I feel like in order to do something like this, you would need like a year of constant communication to make sure that you reach every person. Because I mean, speaking from labor, it's hard to talk to everybody. That's our job. That's what we do every day. And it is hard. So like trying to reach everybody, you always miss somebody, And, you know, that's literally, that is our like day-to-day job every day, is to talk to all of our members. And and you miss people. You don't always reach them. And that's, you know, if that's what we're doing day in and day out all the time, for a group that's isn't focused on doing that day in and day out, I can only imagine, you know, the difficulty of that. So those are basically my concerns with this piece.
Okay,
The passive system, October 31st comes around, you don't hear from me, then you give me a grace period, say, hey, confirm, and I again blow you off, and I keep the coverage that I was default, right, and I will.
So
No,
the correction period is the first half of November. We actually have a little bit of wiggle room with that correction window,
Right.
and so it can be longer. But we do have to have things in by, or decided, essentially, to close out things by December so that we can send them over to the roll. There are exceptions. This committee had adopted many years ago an exception process for staff to be able to handle. So if there are extenuating circumstances with somebody, maybe they were completely unable to out of the country. I don't know, like something completely making a scenario where they were unable to receive any of these messages, receive anything during that period. There is a process that we can be able to grant an exception and bring them in to allow them to have that change too. So there is a gray area outside of the fine dated rules.
Right, so, but under the current passive system that we have, if you don't hear from me, then I just stay in what I was enrolled in prior, right?
Correct.
Okay,
So
so under the active system, now you're just forcing me to make contact with you, and the result is the same.
correct.
oh,
No,
by default into the cheapest plan possible.
If I actively respond by October 31st.
Yeah, that's different. If you
Okay,
actively
no,
respond.
and I'm just chunking it out here. I'm trying to get to what the real, benefit of this. Well, all I see is that if you don't respond by the 31st, do I still have that? Am I still going to be able to verify my non-response?
There's still a correction window that would apply,
Okay,
correct?
so I still have that correction window. So I still have that 1 or 2 weeks of whatever time in November. And again, I don't respond. And then if I'm in a plan that costs more than the single coverage default or the dependent default or the family or the single plan that I'm in, higher than the minimum, or I'm covering my kids higher than the minimum, or I'm covering my entire family higher than the minimum, you're just gonna put me down into the single, dependent, or family plan that's the lowest cost. Is that
Correct.
right?
Correct.
So the only population this is affecting, the people who are enrolled in a plan that costs more than the minimum plan, who don't respond by the correction window.
Correct.
Thank you.
It's just, all I can tell you is that we started generating lists in this other example I tried to give you in July. So this particular employer has retroactivity in their contracts 12 months. The issue is when you're trying to get to your cancer doctor and you're told that's no longer your doctor, and then they threaten litigation and everybody's being threatened and sued. And you're the business agent trying to reconcile that, help your member. It's just, all I can just tell you, it's just not worth it. I mean, the plan that we had that was exclusively union membership is no longer exclusive, and it's open enrollment to everybody because of this particular scenario that happened multiple times.
And just in simple terms, not to be crass, but all this is really doing is reducing our costs to the people who don't respond.
Correct. Yeah, it is, the effort is to focus the city's expenditure on the most cost-effective option for the city for those who are essentially not interested in who their carrier is.
Okay.
On the theory.
It's so much more complicated than that. So, like, for all those of us that sit at a desk every day, this seems remedial and easy, right? I represent people that work with hand tools that are on the verge of being, I don't want to say they're computer illiterate because they're not, but They just don't spend 8 hours in front of a computer monitor every day, like the rest of us. And so, believe me when I tell you, it's much more difficult. There's a reason why 90% of the employees of the city don't currently actively enroll right now.
I understand that.
90% of a number that's 30 or 40,000 is a big number.
I understand that. But I think there are two more points, I think two, maybe three more that I wanted to make though on this concept, because it wasn't just one sided of that. There is the other item that this committee has already talked about that we were tying into this overall active concept. So there is the dependent eligibility audit that we are looking towards to move forward. We're going to have an RFP response to that in a few months, be able to come back to this. But the overall effort that we wanted to be able to tie into this conversation piece of this would be to have employees have the opportunity to come into the system and add their documents now during open enrollment, so that they could have an easier time than later on during the audit that we do that's scheduled for January. So we're already doing a communication effort for that, or the plan would be to already do a communication effort for that. I recognize this is a huge communication challenge, and it would be something definitely that we could do.
How much money are we talking about saving, Paul?
I don't know.
By having people who are in the middle of getting cancer treatment, who forget to make an open enrollment because they haven't had to do it for the 20+ years they've been working for the city, all of a sudden do that.
I don't know, because we haven't priced
cancer doctor.
We haven't priced the plan yet.
Another thing is,
Yes.
you know, you bring
So-
people into
So-
select plans, and when they come in, they may select a higher cost plan. I think the issue you need to find out, talk to people that's involved in, because it's easy from concept, it sounds good. And what is going on, is it, as I always say, is a good, investment on your return on investment.
Yeah.
I mean, you put all this work in, whatever it's going to cost you more, increasing, employee complaints, whatever. And unfortunately, during this time of cuts and whatever, there's balances. You're gonna need staff to do this. And it's just, I think we need to determine items, recommendations, which ones are critical. I think you get a bigger bang out of your buck with the audit. Because you're gonna know, because historically, we've had that experience. So we got, some savings there. But, and you start trying to force people to come in, whatever. Like he said, most of my people are, pushing brooms or plumbing or whatever. And it's just, with tight staff. It's just,
I think the overall challenge that this program has faced repeatedly is the bigger concept of people paying attention to these benefits, of people taking an active effort into their healthcare, of people making choices that are better for themselves. We are talking about changes to the wellness program, which we'll bring forward to the committee at some point in the near future. But I think if this idea is not attractive to the committee or is too problematic to the committee, I would love to hear some ideas of how do we get our employees more involved in their actual care? How do we get them more involved in making decisions that are best for them as well as best for the city? But best for them to combat, and I know this is a topic that we talked about a lot in this committee over the years, but how do we combat them from increasing high cost claims, from going to the doctor at the last minute because they weren't thinking about their healthcare until they got incredibly chronically ill. And it is very multi-layered. There's a lot of factors involved. Life is complicated. People are complicated. This program is complicated. But if we have too many people just not paying attention to things and not taking an active role in their decisions, that's combating the problem or growing it even further. This is a complicated recommendation. It is hard to hear, I think, at least from the point that you're bringing forward, as well as your feedback. But it seemed to be a great option in trying to get people to take an active choice, an active effort into this massive amount of money that we spend towards benefits for them, that they should really probably think about a little bit more than the current practice has been.
what if, like I said, if you get them to change their medical plan, does not change their behavior.
You're right. It doesn't in itself as one action change of
Now,
behavior.
the issue
But-
is that what we have to enforce, try to modify,
And
its behavior. And it doesn't matter what plan you're in if you don't use it. If it's not a program that modifies its behavior. If we can't find a program or any items to deal with that, you can give them all kind of programs, we still do the same thing.
And I think that you're hitting on the key point. How do we get them to think about using it better? If they aren't thinking about it, because we've taught them, don't pay attention to anything. If they aren't thinking about it, how do we get them to think about it?
Well, I will be the first to admit that I wake up on November 1st and go, and I run,
Right.
and I open the packet and it goes, if you don't go on and do anything, this is what you'll still have. It doesn't say you'll only get to keep your, if you go in and make a choice. So part of the thing is gonna be messaging, yes, we've been kind of taught, if you don't do anything, you'll get to keep everything, that you have to worry about it. So you have to change that message.
Yeah.
So that I wake up on October 31st instead of November 1st. But it's half and half. It's half us being lazy or too busy or whatever, and it's also half us coddling everyone for years and years. But there was a point where you had to actively, haven't we done that before?
I have 24 years. I don't remember ever doing it. I tried to look back through all of our records that we have. I don't see an effort of active. Maybe there was one that snuck in there somewhere, but I have not found.
Medical, but some of the other, but yeah, I mean.
There are the IRS plans, right? So those ones have to take action every year. So those are required if you want to participate. And to the point that, and I'm sure labor is going to say, we get a lot of complaints from members who don't do it. I know I was supposed to do this, I didn't do it. And so that is the biggest thing that we get complaints about is from the employees that want to take that IRS plan and then whatever the reason is, they forgot about it, they slept on it, they were too busy doing something. And so we are used to that. And we are essentially recommending through this to multiply that by a lot.
Well, and the package is very daunting, it's huge. And I bet there's.
Yes.
Open it and then put it down, open it and then put it down, but if you said, tell us who made the.
Oh, that
Easy.
that would be the enrollment window. It wouldn't necessarily change the package we are looking at, but at least you open it. We don't have a lot of people that do. So it's great. That's what we want. We want people to pay attention.
Never mind.
People get a package every year?
Yes. Anyone who's enrolled gets a package.
And a postcard,
That's
and
a lot of paper.
we get a lot of stuff.
And that's what we're looking to change. That's coming. We're going to talk about that.
Paul, just to clarify, because I heard what the other Paul said, and he said, it sounds like on October 1st, and maybe it's not that day, everybody's gonna get defaulted effective January 1st of the following calendar year.
So it would be correct. It would be based on it would be based off for January 1st effective date. It would be defaulted based on whatever the lowest cost plan is for that calendar year for their zip code. We have no clue what that's going to be. We don't know right now.
Notification, does Workday have the capacity to, I've never seen it, but why? Does it pop up? You know how your texts used to have little messages, don't forget to do this?
We can't have those messages anymore.
Workday doesn't have those electronic, like, hey,
No, we were just talking about the other day for the vacation, where you used to say you're gonna stop accruing if you reach the max. We have no capability to do that anymore.
We get a lot of communications.
Yes.
it's not enough time though, if you're changing a 100-year precedent of not having to actively.
24 years.
Yeah. Well,
24 of his life.
plus.
I just said, so I guess I misunderstood. So on October 1st, we all default to the minimal.
well, no, it would be effective January 1st, but
Right.
October 1st is the start of the enrollment. So
But that's if you don't do it. Right,
Yeah.
But then you go in, but then when I go into the system, what does it say? Does it say I have to The
So-
PPO, or
so-
does that have Kaiser?
So your health plan would stay the same for the entire calendar year. If you go into the system, it will say your plan for 2026 is going to be whatever the default is. So it could be the same exact plan that you have right now, or it could be a different one depending on what is the cheaper price for it.
Confused?
Whatever the lowest price.
It's okay, it's your call. If you're used to going in and seeing that it's the same one I've had, on this new one, it'll be a different one depending on whether or not that other one is the lowest cost one. That should be enough to trigger you, wait a minute, I should do something, but then of course.
No, but then you might not remember what you have.
No, I-
It should be, this is what you have.
Well,
If
there's
you don't
only,
if you don't choose this, then
This
you're
is
gonna
what you
default to
get.
this.
but there's only so much we can do. If you don't know what your current plan is, I'm sorry, you know.
Well,
But-
no, but Anthem like has these three things and you're like, am I visiting? Am I not? You know?
Do you lose your doctor too? You gotta go back in and select your doctor?
So if your plan changed, then yes.
But you're saying everybody's plan's gonna change.
No, it would be based on whatever the cheapest plan is. So right now, if you look at the enrollment figure, there is a potential future where 62% of the population has a default that looks exactly the same.
Right.
And it's a different percentage of people that would have something else. It all depends on what that plan year cost looks like, and we don't know what that is.
Right, so we're kind of doing something again before we know. So right
Well,
now,
it's setting a rule
Okay.
agnostically.
currently, just because Kaiser's the default, correct? And it's what, 2,100-ish a month, you think?
Yeah, it's pretty close.
And then Paul wants his fancy PPO, and so he's paying the difference.
And so the recommendation as written on page 1 is for just HMO, but then further on in the report, we said an alternative one could be separating it by plan type. And so we could leave the PPO people undefaulted, leave PPO as defined without any action, and only focus on anyone who is actually enrolled
That's
into
not gonna save the
an
city
HMO.
to change them.
It would save the city money to change them if that was the direction that we wanted to go. But it would still save the city money in theory of just focusing on the HMO, just not as much money. And we didn't talk about communication plan because that was going to be second. Communication plan would be key and strong on everything. We would we don't also have to start open enrollment on October 1st. We could extend this period of time. We just need to start earlier.
Only checking, because you can take it on your monthly for the employees, we're still gonna be on that same.
Correct.
We won't start thinking about it until.
Exactly.
November 1st.
Yeah, well, maybe October 28th, right? I know.
Do you wanna go to the next thing?
Sure.
That was a
So-
lot.
Okay, can we,
It's
sorry,
so
can we
hard.
just,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
can we
no.
just ask one more question?
Yeah, yeah.
Are you seeking our action on starting with item B?
So yeah,
Because I guess my point is, and I'm just a weirdo, I apologize, but for me, it would be great if we could deal with these one by one as opposed to talking about all of them and then going back and taking action if you're seeking that today.
we can do it in
I
any.
mean,
So, I'm sorry. let me
Yeah,
interrupt.
I'm
The
sorry.
question whether you want to vote on each sub-paragraph item separately.
Well, I mean, if we're gonna.
Or take it, or selectively, as an example, I move to recommend A, C, D, E.
Yeah, and if we're gonna do them that way, it'd just be easier for me, and I'm just one person, but rather than here, because there's a lot of information to cover here. And so for us to retain that and realize which of these items, we might be in favor of as opposed to have a problem with might be problematic, so. But I'm just one person.
So for the committee, they can choose, however the chair would like to bring that recommendation for vote. But have to vote on each item separately or
Yeah.
as a slate.
Can we still, because I know in the past, once we vote, you can't talk anymore about it.
Correct.
So if we vote on one thing, does that mean this whole thing is
No, you
dead?
can to vote, I mean, if you want to vote on this, item A first,
Right,
take that vote now, and then
and then
continue
continue
the
the
discussion
discussion.
with
We can do that.
C, D, et cetera.
Okay, yeah.
But I don't know,
I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
defer.
No,
You
no, I
prefer to do
love-
it the other way, it's just really
No.
hard for me to follow.
Yeah, no, I like that because it's a lot to think about. Some of them kind of work together in a sense, but I like that idea. How does everybody feel about that? Is there, or let me say, is there anybody opposed to doing that one by one? I think that could work. I didn't know we couldn't do that, to be honest. So I thought once we did that.
So is it the intent
But
for
if
all
we
these
can't-
things to either be adopted together or rejected wholly?
No,
No.
you could adopt each item or reject each item, each stands on its own, so to
Okay,
speak.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, if everybody's cool with doing them individually, I'm okay with doing that.
I think it'll be a lot easier to make
that
progress in the
clearer?
remaining time we have,
Okay,
given how much we love to talk about the details and the minutiae of every single one of these.
okay.
And,
Yeah,
and just to make sure I'm clear too, right? So if there's a motion on one of them, then that conversation is closed. Questions can't be asked unless there's a motion to bring the item back for consideration.
Right. So you can think of it as each item standing on its own, so to
Right.
speak. So if there's a wish to, if a member wants to move and receive and note report, make that motion now and vote on that item or that sub item rather. And then continue on to discuss sub item B and so forth. If you want to skip to a different sub item, you can do so.
I'm gonna start us off on a potential successful.
Yeah,
I'm gonna move approval of A. That's good, and maybe we'll forget about ourselves.
If we,
Well, actually,
if we bring
you're
something,
receiving and donating.
Yeah, I know, that's what I mean.
if
It's
we're bringing
not,
something back,
it's not.
does that,
Need a motion.
no, but I mean, bringing something back, typically when we bring it back into the next meeting or further, when you say bring it back,
Well,
Bring it
I
back
mean,
during
bring it
the-
back to, I guess that would be construed as bring it back at a later meeting. If you want to reopen discussion,
You can move to.
following a vote, you would have to make a motion to reopen discussion. And you need a second. The
Okay.
Committee would have to vote to reopen the item for discussion.
during this meeting,
Yes,
we can still, because the.
So I'm sorry, I
Okay,
yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure.
Locally, I'm meeting, go
Okay.
come back to the next.
Okay, I got you, okay, thank you.
Let's get some success.
All right, let's go. We had, I think we had a motion in a second to approve item B.
Hey,
B, no.
hey, no, you're really.
What's A?
So
We're just voting filing.
It's, this is the grand one, this is the biggest one, be prepared to vote, people.
We received and noted, well, we haven't heard the whole thing, but yes,
We're just receiving and noting, that's all.
it has been duly received and noted.
Do we have a first and a second?
Yes,
The second, I'm sorry, who's the second?
I'll second it,
Okay.
in the interest of progress.
Okay, we're now beginning the vote on item A. Shauna, your vote.
I,
Marlene, your vote.
Aye.
Chad, your vote.
Aye.
Esteban, your vote.
Yes.
Lisa, your vote.
Aye.
Malika, your vote. Tony, your vote.
Aye.
Matthew, your vote.
Aye.
Paul, your vote.
Aye.
Teddy, your vote.
Aye.
The votes are unanimous. The motion passes.
Feel good about ourselves?
Yeah, I'd
It's very good.
like to make a second motion if I may, for item B. So I move that we approve the recommendation as written in the actual, report from the, medical plan request for proposals, and I'm looking at the language 2.5.01. The difference is that this clearly delineates in what you sent us that, the default plan is described as for someone who does not make a positive election one way or the other. And I don't read that in B. And so if that is the intent, then I would like to make a motion, we approve the staff's recommendation related to that.
Sorry, so the motion is to adopt approval of sub item B as amended by the committee member.
Well, exactly. So I'm looking at 2.5.01 from what was
As identified in that in the report.
Yeah, because-
The motion would be to approve 2.5
5.
5.01 in the report.
Correct. Yeah, the description B does not say that, it's for people who fail to make an election.
Clarification.
Yes.
okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded.
We will now begin the vote on item B as clarified. Shauna, your vote.
I,
Marlene, your vote.
Aye.
Chad, your vote.
Aye.
Esteban, your vote.
Yeah.
Lisa, your vote.
Aye.
Malika, your vote.
Aye.
Tony, your vote. Matthew, your vote?
Aye.
Paul, your vote?
Aye.
Hetty, your vote?
Aye.
The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
Thank you. And then we had a lot of discussion on C about the active enrollment process. I have a lot of concerns about it. I think a lot of people raised some issues, so.
Can I ask
Yeah.
a clarifying question about C as identified in the agenda? It appears that it's like an overall arching thing, but it looks like D, E, and F are all a part of that thing.
The way it's
Subset?
written.
It's in the narrative, it's related to each other. They are independent actions. Well, at least E is an independent action. I think C and D arguably would go together.
Yeah, well, that's my concern, is that, C is not identified, C is not defined in C itself. But as I've understood from staff recommendation, that C means doing D.
Yes.
When you say active enrollment, which is the word, the capitalized word in C, that means to do D.
Well, so to paint a picture, which we didn't discuss yet, we could have an active enrollment process where we don't default. Yeah, correct. We could have an active enrollment process where we don't default anybody, but we still have them say they need to take an active enrollment. The problem with that concept is there's no difference, right? Like if I say there's an active enrollment and then I'm still putting in the same
The
plan.
reason why I asked the question, Paul, is that means that I would prefer for the chair to go to D and E than to go to C, because C is not particularly defined.
I mean, if we adopted C without D, then the employee would be defaulted into an employee-only coverage and their
No.
dependents potentially
No.
could not be.
If we-
No?
Well, that wasn't the proposal, no.
Right,
That's
C
what-
doesn't define active enrollment, that's what
Exactly,
Paul was saying.
that's the problem. It could be anything. It could be,
Right, so
Yeah.
that's why I prefer that if D and E are what make up active enrollment for purposes of what staff meant C to be, then I would, as a member, I would say, let's go to D and E before we address C.
I see what you're saying.
I mean, I have another concern about the way C is not defined, and if you read 2.5.05, there's something in here that we haven't even discussed, which is, it says, in the event of a plan change, so it's not just simply somebody not making an election. It's just if a plan changes, they can be defaulted into the least expensive HMO.
But only
That's
at the
outside their
time
control.
Not during the
So that's
year, right?
Well, that's the plan change that the committee adopts. And so we are like 3 meetings away from doing that. So that would be the plan menu for the 2026 year. And so that would be the defining factor of which plans are available, and also define which plans are the cheapest one, or what that price point is. And that's how we would, if this rule was set to say, you're going to go ahead and have active enrollment and you're going to default based on the lowest plan, it's the time that you know that is when the plan's adopted. So that hasn't happened yet. This was the intent to build the rule, completely separate from whatever that action is going to be.
And sub-item C is creating some confusion, or it's unclear as to what is being asked or what is being recommended.
Right.
Then maybe it's not an accurately agendized item or recommendation, and this committee could either decide not to adopt this recommendation and move on to an
We don't have to take them in order, that
No,
I'm
that's
suggesting
right.
that right now,
I
D
think
seems
we'll
to be the meat of what is meant by active enrollment in C. So I would rather have us, if we can, come to some agreement on D. And then that might answer the question for everybody on C. That's all I'm saying, because we can't approve C without knowing what capital A active, capital E enrollment means. But if we adopt D, and I'm not saying that we would, then we'd have a definition for it.
Understood.
Okay,
So can we talk about D?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about D. Oh, what's going on here with D?
Sure. So D is the bulk of what we talked about. It is whatever that plan looks like that the committee adopts. And we identify at that time how many plans are available, what types of plans there are, what the price point is for each plan. Whatever the lowest price HMO plan is, Item D is saying that we would default everyone into that lowest price based on their zip code. So it could be that the majority of the population is all in one plan. It could be based on zip code that we have a split dynamic with different employees in different plans as their default action. It is all dependent on what that looks like. The concept was behind trying to get the movement towards the lowest cost for the city overall from whatever is going to be the plan year from year to year adoption. But that is what D is to say during open enrollment, let's go ahead and default to whatever the lowest cost plan is, all the employees and their dependents enrolled at the time that we process open enrollment, based off of whatever the committee adopts as the plan for that year.
And the reason why it's called active is that means an employee has to be active, now not passive, to make the change to keep the plan they have if that's what they want to do. Whereas before, under the first plan, you will default into the one you're in, whether it's the lowest or highest or mid one. So that's why it's called active, because the employee, if I understand what staff is saying, we're trying to trigger the employees to become more active in their medical insurance decisions. And this, by defaulting them all, triggers something. And I hear what Ms. Palumbi says is, I don't know, but a lot of us aren't triggered that well, and so there's the rub. Right.
And to paint another picture, it would trigger to that point a percentage of people.
Yeah.
We don't a percentage of the people would have no change at all.
Right.
Assuming the same plans are available.
Right. But you've also indicated that right now, approximately a third of our people aren't very active, period. So those would be the ones that I agree with Ms. Palumbi, would possibly we'd be doing something, and no matter what we did, we're not actually kicking them, triggering them into doing anything, and then they might have the situation that then Chad identified.
Well, but to correct you, it's a third of new hires of the current employees, it's 10 only, and it's 90% who don't go in. So you're
That
talking
right?
about.
Okay, yeah, thank you for pointing out. Is that right?
That is correct. That don't go in because of our we believe because of our passive active.
So
You're trying to change
active.
90% of the population.
yeah, well, next time, no, I think staff is trying to tell us it's not exactly that. We won't know what that number is until we make a change, because right now that number is based upon the fact that they're used to that. If we change the dynamic, then we might actually know what percentage of the 90, and it could be very high, simply won't open the envelope.
That's what it was in 2024. 90% of LA Well participants did not
enter the system. It was close. Yes, correct. We had it was only a few thousand people that actually went in and made an election. I need to pull up the number. Yep. Well, out of our 27,000 people, 10% is close to 3,000. And that is around the same figure that we had actively enrolled.
And that's just the medical, or that's not going in at all, because there's all those other things you have to have.
Correct. For the most part, during open enrollment, with the passive enrollment system that we've had, we see people that go in to elect those health plans. We see people that go in to add or change their dependents, and we see a small migration of members that actually change plans without a dependent change. There's not a lot of activity on a typical basis from the larger population of people. And last time we had to, and I could bring it up, but we had.
Because I'm gonna forget this thought if I don't say it right now. Are you saying that within those 3,000 people, is all the people who choose to do the special savings accounts for dependent care and the health care?
We only have about how many? 1,200?
About 3,500.
And this, it mentions during open enrollment 2025 for plan year 2026, is the intent of this to be in perpetuity or just for the 1 year?
Right now, just the 1 year.
Wait, what's just for 1 year?
This recommendation is for 2026.
So
We're not making our,
actually.
right now, we're just focused on 2026. The future is the future.
Makes it better or worse.
Get off, we're gonna do it, let's do it. I'm not saying we should do it.
No.
recommended by
So,
Well, I can, if you want to come up and say anything? We can have our consultant come up.
are there, although he said it's his experience, but what other areas and other agencies that have implemented this have been successful? And what was the same?
Yeah, hi, Megan Gardner with, talking into the microphone, Megan Gardner with Keenan. I'm happy to share some insight on what other agencies do. Just want to be clear, we're talking about C or defaulting D?
D.
Okay. I just want to make sure I know which
It's
one.
related to C.
So that one would be D.
No, it's okay. It's the defaulting currently enrolled employees.
So I think it depends. I've seen this in a couple situations. Somebody brought up and mentioned when there's a plan change, like a medical plan change. I've seen agencies do a couple of different things. Sometimes they will default employees into life plans, as Paul mentioned, HMO plans to HMO plans, and map employees accordingly, and PPO plans to PPO plans. It does vary depending on plan choice, like if there's union plans that are sponsored versus employer sponsored plans, it can vary widely. Most of those agencies that I've seen, they will couple it with a dependent employee verification audit, just to make sure that documentation's proper, enrollment happens, PCPs are selected, and people get into the plans that they actually want to be in. In terms of savings, they're significant in most cases because the dependent employee verification audit, proportionately will find folks who shouldn't be enrolled and those come off.
The question I'm asking is not about the people that should be on there.
Right.
It's the issue is changing from one plan to another. What is the cost saving?
It will depend on the methodology that they chose to employ in that case. So disruption is a factor in that. To Chad's point, some agencies are adverse to having those types of issues. It really will just depend. I can tell you that agencies that are a part of the CalPERS programs went through this several years ago, and every single contracted CalPERS agency had to go through this process and verify their plans and do an active enrollment, provide new dependent documentation. And that was part of the CalPERS program.
But that was part of the audit, it was a combination.
It was a combination that CalPERS actually retains the right on their plans to run an audit every 3 to 5 years. And so they go through that process. But they also actively had an active open enrollment process that they employ every so often. I can't remember the exact number of years, but they go through this. Some agencies don't do it at all. It just depends. I have seen it happen more often and more frequently when there has been a plan change, and organically this mapping process happens. And that is the instances in which I've seen agencies do this on a more frequent basis.
But most of the cost saving individuals, it should not be on the plan.
Yes, that's fair. However, in this concept, depending on what you choose to do, if you're defaulting all employees versus mapping to plan, like plan for like plan, you could see some savings depending on who actively moves back into those higher cost plans or not, and kind of remain in that plan in which they've been defaulted to. We do. Oops, so
I'm sorry, are you, just please go ahead and finish.
Oh, I was going to say, we do actually see a number of agencies that do not have a default at all. And if employees do not make an election, they go without coverage till open enrollment. And in those cases, I mean, and that's not something Paul's said he wants to do at all, because that could be problematic for a potential number of reasons. In those agencies, obviously they don't have utilization on the plan that year, and they're not paying a premium for whatever duration those employees, their window of enrollment was.
I just one more thought about this, and I might ultimately, if the city were to do this, they need to start the education campaign for 2027 or 28 now, as opposed to trying to squeeze us in the next 4 months. 26,000 is a big number for trying to train people with, decades of having something happen. Lisa's the, no disrespect, I'm not trying to say you there, Lisa, but, I mean, she's librarian since your terminal, it's November 1 for her, so. But my plumbers have no chance, absolutely.
I think depending on what happens with the RFP, you could have a number of folks that may stay in the plan that they're in now, the plan that or that is the lowest cost plan already. It really, it's going to depend. However, the concept of an active open enrollment, it is not a foreign concept. That does happen out there. It does happen for public agencies. And I think the circumstances, if they're thoughtful, could be of a benefit.
We have some comments from one of our other consultants, Steve Murphy with Siegel. Steve, please go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My apologies for not being able to be there in person. I just want to acknowledge, I think, the thoughtful comments for this conversation regarding kind of defaulting, doing active enrollment, et cetera. I think that's brought up some really good points. To make this tangible for this RFP process that staff is currently working through, you're likely to generate new plan options that could be a real benefit to members. But doing a passive enrollment actually prevents people from exploring those options. And I would use as an example, when Vivity was introduced, Vivity had many of the same providers that Anthem Full Network had, UCLA, Cedars, and others. And members didn't opt to migrate to Vivity just because they didn't have to. And based on that contribution scheme and whether or not they had 100% coverage, prevented them from exploring it. So I think there are good options, but I would echo Megan's comments that kind of active enrollments are fairly standard, but the idea of kind of using this as a means of kind of finding a bridge to perhaps 2027 to do better, deeper communications to get people prepared for their options, I think could have some value. And then last thought would be, I think a lot of the discussion about the default plan itself is the fact that over time, I think Kaiser had earned that position as kind of the kind of favored plan for a variety of reasons, so geographic access, but they were historically the lowest cost plan option. And they've kind of maintained that for a number of years, but that gap or differential has closed, and Vivity is one option that historically has been lower priced than Kaiser, but did not have a geographic spread. So we suspect that through this RFP process, there may be more opportunities to explore plans that could meet members' needs and do it on a cost-effective basis, perhaps more cost-effective than what Kaiser is doing. So again, I think we're just trying to explore how to kind of leverage resources or opportunities that are coming through this RFP to deliver better value to kind of the members and to the city. So I'll pause for any questions.
There are no questions, Steve. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you both. Yeah, there's a lot in this particular item. I feel like the whole thing kind of revolves around this one. I mean, I've said my piece that I have a lot of concerns with doing this. Yeah. Does anybody, do we have more questions or comments, or does anybody want to make a motion on this one?
So say, Chad, if you're willing to recommend no on the, I'm willing to second it because I'm more interested in what we're all gonna vote on and the sense of our group as opposed to whether I'm definitely for it, definitely against it. So for me, it's just, I'd be willing to make the motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, so, but my motion would be to not approve the recommendation. On D. And I want to be very clear with staff, I'm not actually saying that I would not. I'm trying to get to some idea of how we tackle that as a way of getting to a decision. So we may reopen, but I don't want staff to think that I don't think your recommendation makes sense. I may be 51 for it, but in order to figure out how we as a group would address it, somebody's got to make a motion one way or the other unless we're going to keep having questions. So that's fine. I would move to recommend no. Sounds like he said second. Then we have a chance to try to figure out how we want to wrestle it.
I think I'd rethink this if there were out ways and there was an educational plan in place that we're talking about to bring people along. The concept of active enrollment is not new to me, but new to the city and it's not a bad thing, especially if it drives awareness for other benefits that they're being underutilized. But using their current, enrollment as a bludgeon to get people to participate doesn't make any sense to me. And potentially that's what would be happening for people with continuity of care issues. So that's the reason why I need to go ahead and second the motion.
I would just say that I think we're all, I mean, at least for me, and, looking for ways to save the city money. So it's not like we just wanna oppose, or not, for me anyway, I don't just wanna oppose this, because I think there should be some responsibility put on the employee. But it's just too soon. There's not enough time for 2026. And we all know that communication, even if we do our best, like our members don't even read our things during important times, So changing the mindset is gonna take longer than a couple months.
Can I ask staff a question based on that, both of those comments? Would it be improper for one of us to amend the recommendation? Because I'm willing to change my motion, say, I'm willing to vote for D if you move the dates.
Move them how? I guess.
Put it
so-
out of here, that's all. I mean, I'm just trying to take these two comments into mind.
Right.
And I've already indicated that I'm not against it. I'm probably 51 for it.
Mhm.
But I'm trying to wrestle with us because we all seem to be, we're not sure how we would actually vote when we're forced to. So I'd rather force the issue on us, each of us to decide. And when those two say what they say, then my thought is, if staff thinks that we could still do this, but give us more time, then I would amend my motion to say I move approval of D, but to change the year from 2026 to 2027 on that last line, and then see if somebody else says that's good, because that gives us time to prepare for it. But I want to ask staff, does that make sense based upon your recommendation? Because I got a lot of confidence in staff.
Thank you.
Okay?
It is definitely something we could do. Does it make sense for this current fiscal year? Does nothing for the current fiscal year, does nothing for the plan year itself. If there is support to move it forward, though, I think
Okay, sure. All right.
I think it could work.
Okay.
I think there's also some concerns with the whole process, though. I mean, as written, as far as, I don't like the automatic default at the very beginning.
Well, could I suggest if the concern with the proposal is not understanding how to implement it, or if it is successful on implementation, and not so much with the action itself, maybe it is take no action on these two items, and staff can bring it back as a different recommendation with it more flushed out. We could go that route. And then continue to talk about it. But if the overall consensus is that this is not on the table, it's not going to happen, then I would ask you to vote no on that now, so that we know not to talk about this for further discussion.
Hence the reason why I made my motion. I'm trying to have staff get a sense for what the committee feels like as a whole. I did it as a negative because I could just as easily done it as a positive, forced everybody that way. But so at this point, I'm going to withdraw my motion.
Draw a second.
I'm gonna move to approve D. Pony up, people. If
Wait,
we
are
don't
we
have a
gonna-
second, then we don't have to vote.
Hmm.
I move to approve D as written.
I'll second.
Go.
Okay, this is the roll call vote for item D.
And just to be clear, this is a motion to approve.
Yeah.
Okay.
As written.
The vote is for item D.
Item D as written, okay.
As before, we're going to start with the labor organizations and then followed by management. Shauna, your vote.
No,
Marlene, your vote.
Absolutely not.
Chad, your vote.
Please let the record reflect that I said no.
Esteban, your vote.
No. I can vote any way I want to. You vote against it, so. Absolutely.
Lisa, your vote.
aye.
Malika, your vote.
Aye.
Tony, your vote.
No.
Matthew, your vote.
No.
Paul, your vote.
Nay.
Hetty, your vote.
No.
The motion is not approved.
Okay, next
Alright.
item. Next sub item, sorry.
Okay. So then, since we did D and voted that down, and C essentially relies on D.
Doesn't
No, it
necessarily.
doesn't. Well, it doesn't, but it's terrible if it's not.
No, we could
That's
move
what I mean.
approval, we could
Yeah.
move approval of C and ask staff to come back with a plan for what that would look like. And that plan could include implementing this year or next year.
Well, let me put it this way, does anybody want to make a motion on C?
I would move approval of C with the recommendation that staff come back, give us a plan based upon our discussion that might be one that would be approved by the committee. So I would move.
I don't think I
I don't,
understand the
yeah,
motion.
I don't think there's that subsequent condition negates the actual vote. So
Right, okay.
if,
You're right, it says to implement.
right, so
Okay, John.
the committee can decide again to continue sub-item C and have it bring back this sub-item C as a separate agenda item at a subsequent meeting, or you can vote on it at the moment, whether to approve or not. And the item can still be brought back at the meeting.
Well, then I guess the tenor of my motion would be that to move the staff, to have staff bring something back that in the nature of C.
Understood, but that can happen after, as a future agenda item.
Right.
For the question now is whether this committee wants to act on the recommendation as offered under C.
Okay.
Do you want to make a motion to recommend C?
Silence is deafening.
Hearing none. Let's move on to item E. Do we need to, or we don't need to? Do we just?
Yeah.
No action taken.
No action taken on item C.
Okay, so moving on to item E, I don't think we've had a lot of discussion about that yet, so let's.
Sure. So this can be independent from the active passive enrollment conversation. It was put in the report together with it, just because that's where it fell. But the recommendation would be to support an action for the enrollment process to allow for employees to upload their dependent documentation at that time of open enrollment. We'd have part of our communication campaign would be trying to advertise and get people to take that action now during open enrollment and not waiting until the audit happens. This would also be our amnesty period, where if somebody removed a dependent, they no questions asked, the dependent is removed, and they're not going to be part of the audit process anymore. And if an employee did not upload their documentation, no problem happens to them for those existing dependents. They're still in coverage, but they will become part of the audit process, and then we'll go with that audit process at that time. And so the action would be an identified action. Everyone would see it that had a dependent when they went into their online enrollment process, but it would be a no fault action itself.
So this is essentially do it now before the audit, more of a communication, encouragement, makes everything run smoother, and may have the added benefit of kind of moving people towards more active enrollment in that sense, because now they're looking at something. So maybe there is kind of a knock-on effect there.
Are we loading into Workday or some other platform?
Oh, it's a separate third-party platform that TELUS provides. So they would have, so right now, if an employee has a dependent on their profile, the dependent's there, there's nothing they can do with that dependent. They can't change the data. So this would create an ability for them to upload a document to that existing dependent. It would create an action for them. But it is the third-party system through TELUS. That information in TELUS' system is not shared with Workday. Nobody except for my staff can access it.
And if there was a dependent that wasn't supposed to be on there, they're not gonna be asked to pay anything back, versus if they don't do it during this open enrollment and if they're found during the audit, There will be payback?
Correct. So this would be the amnesty option. So if somebody has a dependent that's not their actual dependent anymore, so they got a divorce, they never told us, and their dependent is still covered, they can remove that dependent now through this open enrollment item, no questions asked. The dependent stays on, then in the audit, when we find out that that divorced person is divorced, then there will be an effort to be able to collect premium for
Back
that.
to when the date of the divorce?
Correct, but that would be, that's still stuff that we work out through the audit process. So those are all rules and discussion that we'll have later on once the vendor is selected.
For this, so the employee can know what they're gonna put into next year.
Correct. So it's very much an encouragement to try to get people to do the amnesty route. Make life easier for everybody.
Move approval of, staff recommendation.
Second.
Okay. Go ahead and roll.
Okay, we will now begin the roll call to vote on sub item E, starting with labor and then with management as before. Shauna, your vote.
Aye.
Marlene, your vote.
Aye.
Chad, your vote.
Aye.
Esteban, your vote.
Yeah.
Lisa, your vote.
Aye.
Malika, your vote.
Aye.
Tony, your vote.
Aye.
Matthew, your vote.
Aye.
Paul, your vote.
Aye.
Petty, your vote.
Aye.
The vote is unanimous. The motion passes.
Thank you, and with hopes for so much communication about that. Okay, moving to F, we haven't even begun having discussion about this, I don't think, so please walk us through.
Sure. So I think F is a somewhat simple concept. We are in the overall concept of cost, we are saying that the situation, as we've seen also in past years, can create where there is one plan that has a very large number of people on it. And if that is the cheapest plan for the city, that's great. If it's not the cheapest plan for the city, it's not so great. And so in a scenario where the plan that is more than 50% of the population is not the cheapest plan, then we want to freeze enrollment for new enrollees. So that would mean only the new hires, when they get their enrollment package, that plan would not be an election option because it was, but every other plan would be. That is the recommendation. And so it would only be if that plan that exceeded 50% of the population was not the cheapest plan.
So this one, for me, this feels more two-tier than some of the other options, because you could have somebody, again, sitting next to somebody working in the same office, and one of them has access to this plan, and the person, working in the same office with them does not have access to that same plan. Can't even have that plan. So that's the concern for me, is the creating this, inequitable, in my view, kind of system. Where you have people who work alongside each other, part of the same unit, and they don't have equal access to the same coverage. So that would be my concern with it.
If your total number of slots is 100. And so you're gonna give 50 slots to any one plan and then stop enrollment in that plan.
Only if that plan is not the cheapest. If the plan is still the cheapest, then more slots still go to that plan.
Okay, so let's assume that Kaiser, hypothetically, that's our largest enrollment. That's the cheapest. And all 50 slots are filled. I retire, now there's 49 slots. They both came in and last year, but they were pushed to another plan because there's no more room at the Kaiser Inn. How do you determine who gets into Kaiser? They both want into Kaiser. Are you gonna create a wait list?
So that is not technically a new enrollment by the way that we've described it. It would be the envision of this would be a new hire only. So one of them would have to leave the city and come back for it to be applied to.
So if there are only 49 seats at Kaiser and Tony and Lisa both want to get in their second year, you could push enrollment up to 51?
In this concept, I mean, we could make the rule any way the rule should work, but in the concept, correct, yes.
Okay.
So current employees can still go in to
That,
raising the percentage.
that was the way that we were looking at this. And it would still only be
Both of new hires
correct.
or rehire.
Yeah, and we can make that more specific in this direction. If that is the,
Yeah, so over time, this doesn't necessarily force down enrollment
Yeah.
to a maximum of 50% of the single plan. Because the way I was thinking about it was, if you have 60% enrollment, you're gonna have to get down to 50% minus one before someone new can go in. That's not the case. It's on your second go around, now you're established. So people can still go into the cheapest plan and it can still exceed 50%. In which case you're just sitting out a year.
and the way that's written, if it's the cheapest plan, it's always gonna be open no matter what.
Okay.
But
And that's the-
But for your thing policy, the second people plan, that will be capped at 50 unless you're an existing employee.
Correct. Yes, okay.
Yeah, this will get a little sloppy because what do you do with somebody who, the new hire to the city is working alongside somebody, and at the time, the plan, the desired plan was not the cheapest plan, and there was no, there was no access for new hires because you're above 50%. And then a later date, you have a rash of retirees, and now Marlene, who I'm working right next to because she's trying to be a plumber like me. She has access to it afterward because now the rate is gone. I mean, the rate's now above or below 50%.
You still have
We-
access.
No, your second year,
No,
you have to actively enroll after
So
your.
after your second year, you can enroll whatever plan you want. Or
Yeah.
after at your original, your first open enrollment.
Yeah, and we can define it better in the recommendation so that, or making clarification to make that clearer, so there's not confusion on it, but the overall freeze concept is focused on trying to, in the event that the most popular plan is not the cheapest, to try to curb the growth of it and the easiest way possible on the less amount of impact.
Yeah, it's just not clear to us how you're going about that.
And
Like,
it's-
people are subject to not being able to pick the plan of their choice because it's not the cheapest. And when does that end? And
Some new hires.
What if,
but subsequent open enrollments, I could choose that, and then the number would be above 50%.
But you're
Right,
actively
new
choosing it.
Okay.
But I don't, if that's the case, and thank you all for the clarification, because I was reading it differently. I don't see how that's substantially different than B that we already approved with the default. So I'm confused about what
Yeah, it's very similar to that.
what benefit does that provide in agreement? Because if it's already, if that one's already not the lowest, then we're already defaulting people.
Well, it's,
Election options.
yeah, it's taking it off the table.
Right.
In the hypothetical, right? Like there's a very strong chance that this scenario never even comes to play, right? There is, it all depends on what the plan menu looks like each year. But in the hypothetical world where there's a whole bunch of people that gravitate to one plan and that plan skyrockets in price, we want to look at ways to not have the enrollment continue to grow, potentially.
And I can see why this is part of your trigger to make people more active, because people may not be thinking that their plan is costing more. And then the passiveness that then leads the city to have to pay more money than they need to, because people aren't actively thinking about their plan as opposed to.
Right.
I think this would encourage our, encourage not active, discourage active enrollment. I realize that. Yeah, well, I think let me explain it out and then let me, because maybe y'all figured out, but it feels like doing this would discourage active enrollment, because if I'm gonna default into this plan, unless I make an active enrollment, but the other plan is blocked to access, what am I going in and electing?
Yeah, the other options
I can
that
choose
would
the
be on the
PPO.
table. Yes,
Uh,
definitely.
Fantastic for me. But for the average person,
Well, I would say you could choose a PPO if the PPO is in 50%, right? Like it is focused on it is It is focused on trying to have a little bit more deviation within the plan dynamic when there is a very clear big player. And we could also do, and I know we're this has been a long conversation already. We could retool this. We could also bring it back with C or to talk about it another time as well. If there, it definitely seems like there's a little bit more confusion on it.
That I read it first. It makes sense to me that it not basing it on new enrollment, it based on new enrollments, meaning if I've been here 30 years, but my 31st year I decide to change to it would be a new enrollment. If you just kept the language like that, then you really could cap it at 50%. You're not really capping it at 50% if next year I get to go to it anyway.
Right, and that's how the motion reads. New enrollment and new hires are two different
So-
things.
Sorry. Yeah. Well, maybe we need to rethink it then.
Yeah.
Because new enrollment the second year is new enrollment.
Well, could we have staff just retool this one and bring it back?
Sure.
Can I,
I like it as is.
my side's gonna shoot daggers at me, but I'm just gonna throw it out there anyway, I don't care.
Can I shoot daggers at you before you say it?
Yeah,
Go
probably.
ahead, all right, go ahead.
No, did anybody give me consideration just defaulting new employees to the cheapest plan for a period of time?
You mean without the election window?
Correct. You're a new employee, you have great benefits here, but for the first fill in the blank time, you default into the cheapest plan.
So the problem with that is we would be denying their ability to choose the other voluntary options. So
They
they
don't exist in the cheapest plan.
no, I'm not talking about that. I mean, life insurance, disability insurance, the other plans, the ones that
Well,
we
I
can't.
understand why you can't offer them the cheapest health plan and still have right access to those things.
Well, it needs to be one election. So it's a life event election of whatever the menu is. So we can't say you're going to have this plan no matter what, and then you can't pick anything else until open enrollment. At least, I mean, we could technically do that, but that would be the rule. What we can do is create a scenario where someone has an action and then they can routinely open that action and reelect and reelect and reelect, essentially.
I'm sorry for bringing it up, but, and please, everybody save your daggers.
I mean, all thoughts are good thoughts.
No, I was a participant in a plan that had that as a rule, like, you know, after year 2, you could elect other plans, but for the first 2 years, you had that.
At what point do you determine that it's hit capacity? Is it gonna be a fixed point, like on December 31st of this year, will determine if it's closed for the following year? Or is it a rolling thing?
Good question.
We would need to put that into a further honestly vetting. This was thought of as being as of that year, as in current envision, it would be after open enrollment is all closed. So we wouldn't do anything until this window is closed. And December, we're going to make that determination. And then if there is that in existence, that's how we identify the freeze. But you have a great point, right? Moving forward, like what happens? And so that we quite honestly didn't think past the open enrollment window on this particular item yet. So we'd have to figure out what that looks like.
I think the use of the term active enrollments also confuses me a bit because we're using active enrollment on the recommendation page, to me, two completely different things. So I think that I'm not clear what 50% of all active enrollments means, if that just means enrollments of active employees, or if that means of 50% of people who are actively enrolling. I'm a little confused on it.
Do we have any idea how many of our new employees are being employed for the first time?
We'd have to pull, you mean a true new hire never had a history of working for the city before?
But he
No,
never
no.
worked.
Here's what I'm taking. There are a few MOUs. MOU 5 in the CIA. A vast majority of inspectors are second career. So I'm accepting a position with the city of Los Angeles. I'm working for that other agency that Chad's not going to name the name of, and I have Kaiser. And I just want to continue that coverage. So I'm coming into the city, and lo and behold, and that's not going to happen. Because that's the plan that I'm precluded from enrolling in. And so there's going to be disruption there, but I'm sensitive to disruption, but not if it's like 3 people a year. I mean, nothing can be perfect. But I'm just curious to know, is there a way of getting to? Yeah.
I don't think so, because we're not privy to any of the resume data that might exist, and Workday doesn't have outside employment information on it.
I would also say for a very few people, like if they're terminated from the city unjustly and justifiably we get their jobs back, should they be not allowed to go back into their Kaiser or whatever plan? Could there be exceptions that you consider, especially if they kept Cobra? How does that work?
We could build in, so I guess in the retool, we could try to address that in its original concept, that would be not allowed. But we could look at that.
Well, you can follow a couple issues there. If you took your money from Lacers, then you truly have severed. So
Well, if you don't, no, these people won't take their money from Lacers if they're going through civil service.
Or you could use the 3-year rule. I mean, we technically don't treat you as a new hire.
Well, the wording in the admin code is may on that.
Yeah,
not
so
shall.
we could say shall in this case.
Please say shall.
That would be an option. No, I said could say shall.
You guys have to stop negotiating here.
Yeah, all of a sudden I'm in the middle of something. What happened?
That's my answer.
So, yeah, so I think we had a lot of thoughts on that. So it sounds like we need to see some different language, maybe more fleshed out. So then, procedurally, do we just do no action and then?
Sub item F,
Yeah.
okay,
It's, yeah,
okay.
yeah, okay,
Just bring it back to life.
okay.
I think CD on it, right?
Look at that, we're all the way to G.
Oh, there's a G.
Next page.
If there's a J, it must be a G.
Okay, go ahead, or talk about G.
Well, I guess G, is
Yes, and as much as
not,
we did take action on C and we voted D down, then I don't think there's something to come back to there.
I would concur, unless you wanted to amend it to say for us to retool and come back with the logistics of it.
He's gonna say we can't do that.
Yeah, but, I mean, if G is coupled with the other item, forget the letter, I apologize. So,
C and
why,
D.
yeah, why don't, again, bring back G along with C and D?
Well, but we haven't instructed them to come back with C and D. C was no action. D was voted down. We've given him the sense that we've given them the sense that they might retool F. He's approved, might retool F and come back. Now, that doesn't mean the staff couldn't, after all this conversation, go, I think I can take another stab at that. That would be up to them.
So it's, yeah, with respect to D, you can not vote on this item. By the moment, and, or you can vote, not vote to not accept the recommendation to instruct staff. And then at a subsequent meeting, you would bring back, or you would now bring, rephrase, you can reintroduce a different agenda item that addresses some of the concerns that were addressed here.
The chair,
Yeah.
based upon our having rejected D and taken no action on C, I would recommend that we not take up item D.
Yeah, no action on item G, okay. Yeah. Okay. So means no action.
items over.
Okay. We made it.
I'm gonna go back to do balancing now.
Okay.
Every day off.
Thank you, everybody. So,
Don't do it anymore.
yeah, future agenda- yes, sorry, go ahead. Okay, so the request for future agenda items. Do we have any? Are we good? Okay. So 429, look at that. We only took an extra half hour. So our next meeting will be May 29th special meeting and we are adjourned.
And it is 9 a.m. for the special on the
Thank you.
29th.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. Nice to get that in.
Thank you.
My walk's in here later.